They never had to institute mandates for masks. So there are other countries where you can also make that case. So anyway, that was my question. What metric are we targeting?
I guess your comment of anonymous.
Judge Whitley, 53 confirmed cases, an 88% reduction since July. That is a cliff off which we have fallen off with respect to this alleged disease. Number 3, the doubling time for COVID is now flat. It's flat, i.e. we have flattened the curve. The curve is flattened. Let's declare victory here. We have flattened the curve. Wasn't that the original thing we were all talking about back in March when all this stuff happened, when we took away our liberty?
That I look around and this is no longer the united free states of America. That hydroxychloroquine and betazidine work, and they are censoring our doctors right here in Dallas, Texas. Dr. Lozano, Dr. Bartlett, and other great physicians are being censored and banned and not allowed to say the truth about the cure for this COVID, which is a bioterrorist attack. But I have the freedom to choose. I have the freedom.
Our panel to start researching what the ACE study is the largest investigation of childhood abuse, neglect, household challenges, and later life health and well-being predictors caused by toxic stress. Abuse and neglect is not just regarding parents, but can also include clergy, coaches, or teachers. Children are in school for socialization and education, not for more stress. These unlawful shutdowns and mask orders have also put many families into poverty, causing other harmful effects to a child, with some parents turning to alcohol or causing violence in the home due to stress, which raises their ACE scores.
To actually do their own research. Is this the kind of legacy you really want to be remembered for? Creating COVID concentration camps when numbers don't require such measures? Discussions of raising taxes during a recession, not only at the state, but also local government, have caused due to creating policies based on misleading data.
We don't have a mandate for masks. I'm not going to bore you with the decades of scientific data, numerous randomized controlled trials, or peer-reviewed data showing there's no statistical or measurable advantage for wearing a mask. I've heard anecdotal evidence. The
mandate with regard
is a rape victim. They've already suffered with anxiety, depression, PTSD, and now the lockdowns. Every time she wears that mask, she's tormented by the memories of having her rapist cover her mouth. And every time she leaves her house, she has to decide, does she put that mask on and relive those traumatic events? Or does she deal with the hatred and the restrictions and the rejection that she feels when she tries to walk into a grocery store?
Telling you that your cost for your housing assistance is fixing to double. A lot of it has to do with the unemployment rates in this county and across this country. Unlike your counterparts in Washington, D.C., y'all don't have a printing press sitting in the basement. If we don't open back up, we're going to end up with bread lines. Because the
United States Constitution reads, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or the right of the people to peaceably assemble, and to petition the government for redress of grievances.
I would like to remind you judges of some types of lawsuits that may give rise to a quantum lawsuit that includes 1, knowingly presenting to the Fed government a fraudulent claim for payment. I think Vinny's
and terrifying part, people are not afraid of the government who removed their freedoms. They're afraid of their neighbors, family, and friends, and they hate and mock those who will comply. It is absolutely terrifying to me that so many people don't question authority. They are willing to surrender their critical thinking skills and independence. They just give up without thinking, without a fight.
Forced upon many students with disabilities, students who receive 504 accommodations, and others have a very difficult time with the virtual schooling that is being offered. As we do not get the one-on-one, in-person face time with our teachers in order to facilitate learning with our special situations. Not all students are the same, and I feel that this group of students have been ignored and neglected by both the schooling system and government, with the imposition of virtual school. Virtual schooling is unwelcoming, makes participation difficult, and ultimately affects the motivation and morale of special needs students who thrive on in-person targeted learning.
Threatened by law enforcement if we so much as lower our mask for one breath of fresh air or even to clear our glasses from fog. You have officers of this court who will not even let public into the building so that they may speak their piece with you without intimidation tactics and threats.
But I talk to people in stores who are workers in stores. They all tell me without a doubt that they go home with headaches. They go home and they're wiped out because they can't breathe properly. When I have to put this stupid thing on, I feel like I can't breathe properly. And, what is it going to take? Is it going to take somebody to literally fall over dead, or many people to fall over dead because they're not getting the proper oxygen through these masks? Do you guys care? Does anybody care? And what happens do we ever shut our government, or do we ever shut the people down and require masks when the flu season is going around? And that's far more deadly for children. But what we're doing to children, that's a whole nother issue. They have to socially distance. The long-term psychological effects from these kids being treated as if they are enemies of the state. And that's the way they're being treated. This is all very abnormal. It's not right. It's not freedom. I talk to people from other states, and they tell me that they can't believe how less free Texas is than other states. Get off of it. What is it going to take? Or is the next thing, well, you have to have a vaccine in order to not wear a mask? What's the next thing? This is a very slippery slope. I don't like, the CDC. A lot of this is being done for political reasons, and I personally do not appreciate it. Even little Lord Fauci, and that's what I call him, said that this will all be over in November. What else is in November? The election. Get over it. Get over it. I'm telling you, we the people are mad about this, and we're not going to take much more of this. I'm telling you now.
North Korea, we don't have leaders that are a cadre of untouchable, unanswerable, unchecked, pot-bellied autocrats. We here, we're the descendants of a special kind of freedom warrior. Americans, we threw tea in the face of a monarch, and we spilt our blood and treasure at the altar of large and small freedoms. We're proud of that. And last time it was just a small consumer tax that broke that camel's back. And I would say, much like you gentlemen, the King's men often probably sneered at speeches that history views a little bit more kindly.
Having power and authority, are you saying that none of you have a voice when it comes to Governor Abbott? He does not allow you to speak or hear your opinions, and you have no input?
I have not been asked for input. I guess one time since we started, did he ask for my input on a particular matter? I have been able to talk with some of the staff and give them my thoughts. Whether they had conveyed them to the governor or not, I do not know. But the governor has not sought out my opinion other than that one instance. The school boards, they can seek out, but ultimately the governor makes his decision. Ultimately the school boards make their decision. Ultimately, as a court, we determine how far out the emergency declaration goes, and I decide.
Businesses to close, never to reopen again, causing families to lose their livelihood. Forced masks on us with very little scientific evidence that they stop the spread of a 0.05 micron virus. These flimsy, overworn homemade masks do nothing but instill fear and control of the masses at best.
Constitution. It is the supreme law of the land. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press, or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. What are the first 3, 4, 5 sentences? Part of that is make no law.
Was more contagious and more deadly than most. The role of government is to protect our rights, again, to life, to liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. When the actions taken by government to protect one right infringe on the others, maybe government has overstepped its bounds.
Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Shannon Braun. 94%. That is the number that was miscalculated in the CDC numbers of deaths due to COVID. 94%. That is not a slight miscalculation or oversight. That's a very large miss. That is a number I would call corruption, greed, lack of moral integrity. I would also call that an agenda.
Fear. And we're beyond it because of a mandate. People that I know, people who spoke of this before me, are cowering and afraid. They're family members that aren't even talking to each other. Because one says, I want my liberty of knowing when to put my mask on to protect someone, and when I know I don't need it. God bless these people with all this fear. It's quite tragic when you have no faith and you only have fear.
My name is Steve Stanley. I'm a resident of Tarrant County my entire life. I'm also diagnosed autistic. Recently, because of this mask mandate, I've been forced to stay at home. I have not been able to leave that much. First time was a few weeks ago when I was able to the EC meeting for the Republican Party. So a few months later, in early August, I was able to attend a rally here in downtown Fort Worth over what happened, over everything but March for America, because of what's been going on in the protest. Sorry.
That's all right. Take your time.
Yeah. So because of the situation, we tried to give me a mask. We tried to call my doctor's office to give me a no exemption card so I could not wear a mask out in public, because it's hard to wear a mask, especially with my autism. And they told me no. They rejected my application and could not wear it, so I have to stay at home now. So I can't even go to school because I know if I have to do it in person, I have to wear a mask unless I can get an exemption card, which I cannot get. That is disgusting what has happened. And a lot of people, we've seen a lot of videos online of those who have decided that because of these mask orders, they're going to enforce them themselves. See people demand that you have to wear a mask all the time. People who are not corporate employees target others.
I have a problem with the mask. I am type 2 diabetic, I am asthmatic, and I have a neuromuscular disease. Every rule should say, well, you need to stay home. I have to support myself and my child. I have to take care of me. If I were unable to, if I were totally disabled, I would expect the government to take care of me because I have paid in, because I have worked since I was 17 years old. But it is not the government's responsibility to take care of me when I have a job and I can go and do it. And if I get sick, I get sick. Sorry, as a Christian, it's God's will. If I die, it's a win-win situation because I get to go to heaven.
85% of their business once COVID struck. They now have to make a decision on long-term employees that have been around for 11 years that had to quit and stay home because they had to homeschool their children. And they had to choose between their job and the safety of their child. What happened in the spring was with staying at home for virtual learning was more of a babysitting job for parents. Now with the new setup for it, it's going to require even more work as parents to actually help teach, help with technology, help with the Zoom, help with all of those things. It's so much more involved, and parents are no longer are able to find babysitters to do it. They really have to stay home, and they're losing their jobs.
3 people that I mentioned wore a mask everywhere they needed to wear a mask. And that brings me to the point that I came up here to speak about. I'm a 100% disabled vet, both served in the Marine Corps and the Army. And I've always followed rule of order and rule of law. As long as it's a lawful order, then I obeyed it. And so therefore, even going into stores, I try to wear a mask, even though being 100%, I do have exemptions. My son, having COVID, did have a doctor's note saying that he does not have to wear a mask. And yet, we were in a Panera store, a Panera Bread, and he didn't have a mask on. They come up to him and they tell him, "Sir, you need to have a mask on." And I was flat out telling me he has a medical exemption. And they looked at me, they looked at him and said, we do not care.
What this is doing to healthy people, and this is wrong. This is 42 sources, 42 studies of the dangers and the ineffectiveness of mask wearing, okay? I'm not going to go over all of them, but I will leave it in your office. Just a couple of highlights.
You are ill, not healthy. Moreover, wearing one can create, not deter, illness. When individuals wear masks, they end up touching their faces more frequently, which can lead to infection. They also rebreathe particles that their lungs have exhaled that are trapped in the mask. Additionally, the masks that everyday people wear impede oxygen flow and aren't porous enough to allow carbon dioxide to fully dissipate. All of these things decrease the body's immune response. According to Dr. Eli Tarrant, an internist and infectious disease specialist, the average healthy person does not need to have a mask, and they shouldn't be wearing masks.
Accident that I'm glad I did. You know, some people are dead set on the mask. Lovely mayor, no mask. In a facility that you should be wearing a mask. Imagine that. Senator, no mask. Imagine that in a place where you should. Sheriff at the bar, imagine that after the lifting. With a kid by there, by the way. Imagine that. Mr. Vickers, Mr. Wilder, right there. Boom. You're wearing stockyards. Nobody following the mandate. Nobody. Except for us common folk. Time picture after picture after picture after picture of violations. So that shows you where they respect. They do not respect this mandate. They have no respect for it except for us. Business is getting shut down. 3 bars you say got suspended. Make it 4. And these are the upper echelons.
Economic weapon against the people that it was supposed to protect. The purpose of the Constitution is to limit the power of the government, not to limit the people. Medical decisions and the wearing of masks should be a decision not in the hands of the local governments or lawmakers. It's a decision between the individual and the physician after
this court. I just wanted to kind of clarify my role. So I am the public health director for the county, and as such, I do not practice medicine in that role. My degrees are MBBS, which is a foreign medical degree. It is a medical degree equivalent to MD here in the U.S., but I studied in India. They follow the old British system, so the nomenclature is different. And I have a Master's of Public Health from Eastern Kentucky University here in the United States. Master's of Public Health is really what is, qualifying me as a public health professional. And my role as the public health director is an administrative role as the department's director. We do have a separate medical director, Dr. Catherine Colquitt, and she's also our health authority. She's the medical doc, she's an infectious disease specialist. I consult with her all the time. The health department's medical operations, the clinics, they run under her medical direction, under her license and under her standing orders. So all of the clinical operations operate under that. And on health matters, we conduct with or consult with our health authority on a regular basis. And the way the structure is set up, even though she's my medical equal, if you will, within the department, under the structure, her position reports to me because I'm the department head. Now that structure is not unusual. We have close to 3,000 health departments across the country, and if you look across, there are many examples like that where they have a health director and a medical director. Now, are there departments where they have medical directors as the health director? Sure. Yeah, those examples are there as well. But, a lot of places can't even afford a medical director full time. They have these volunteer health authorities and volunteer health directors or medical directors that help out by signing those medical orders so that the health department director can actually run the department and their clinical services under those medical orders. So, I am the spokesperson for the health department. That's why you see me here in Commissioner's Court. That's why you see me giving public health guidance. I want to be very clear because it was called to question, why am I giving you all medical advice and issuing medical orders? We're not doing that. You all understand that, but I just want to be very clear for the public that what I do is I provide public health guidance. A medical advice or a medical order will come from an individual provider to the person who's seeking care from that provider. So even when Dr. Colquitt comes out, she's giving you public health advice. She's not even issuing medical guidance at that point or giving medical orders. Now, in her role, when she's in the clinic, she is giving medical care to people and gives medical advice to people and writes prescriptions and orders for them. And under her role as the health authority, occasionally she can issue a control order, which is a public health tool, not necessarily a medical tool. So those are some of the clarifications on why I'm up here talking about public health issues and what is my role. My role is the administrative role of a public health department director, which is very different than what the health authority does. And we work hand in hand pretty much every day on a variety of issues, including COVID-19. So that's all I have, and I'll be happy to go into the briefing and go over some of the stuff that we've been seeing. So, as a reminder, I took out the West Nile slides because that data is declining, and we're happy to see that go away. Situational awareness from a COVID standpoint, U.S. and the world is in another upswing of cases. Definitely, we're starting to see a surge occur. Even in Tarrant County, we're starting to see what they finally explained how their data got all goofy because of how
rep over the TABC. They did go to several of the bars that were open up and some of those that are considered restaurants because of a loophole. And I was informed that there were 3 within the North Texas area that were going to be suspended for a 30-day period, 1 in Fort Worth, 2 in the Dallas area. I was told that late yesterday, and I'm not sure they've, that particular place in Tarrant County doesn't open up until Thursday, and at that point he had not had a chance to talk with the owner yet to inform him that he was losing his liquor license for 30 days, but so I don't want to mention the name until I know for sure that they've done that.
Yeah. And Your Honor, and members of the court, the fire marshal is he and his deputies will be out beginning the latter part of this week and the first part of next week. We don't have that many bars that are in the unincorporated area, about 12 to 15, but we're going to do visual inspections on capacity issues and things like that. We want to make sure that those bars and those bar owners are fully aware of what the county's position is on all of those. So that's something that Randy Renoir did. He took that on right away, and we're making sure that those that are in our jurisdiction also receive the message.
Question for the DA's office. If he went into one of those places and they were not compliant if they're not compliant with the occupancy, I assume that he can ask them to leave and then only allow in the number of people to get to that occupancy level. What about masks? Can he write citations since we as a county don't have ordinance making authority? He is Randy Winraw, the fire marshal.
And the fire marshal has peace officer status, just like any sheriff's department people. So,
our recommendation to the fire marshal would be to go ahead and enforce what he can normally enforce, occupancy, and do what he can normally do. But to the extent that there's not social distancing or not wearing masks, that he report that to the TABC so that they can come in and do the enforcement.
So that partially, that told me what you thought. I mean, I guess it told me what you're recommending to him, but does he have the authority to write a citation citing them for not wearing the mask as is ordered by the governor and the institution or the business itself, a citation to them for not following my order?
I do not believe that he can write a citation for violation of your order or the governor's order.
Okay. Who can?
Fort Worth Police Department can write citations for violations of the Fort Worth ordinance because they have in their ordinance that it is a $250 or $500 fine, but a violation of the county order or a violation of the governor's order is not something that is punishable by citation, other than the mask component in GA 29, which does allow citations to be written for not wearing a mask if you've received a warning. There are some concerns about that particular enforcement measure.
Well, we know they can get up and walk away if they want to.
Correct.
But if they don't walk away, are you saying that the governor's order is unenforceable in the unincorporated area?
For mask wearing?
Yes.
So there's two governor's orders in play, GA 29 and GA 32. GA 29 allows you to write a citation for not wearing a mask if you've been warned. Okay. If an enforcement officer feels comfortable doing that, then we can presume that that is valid. GA 32, a violation of that order cannot be enforced by a citation, is our interpretation of that. Because the offense is not a Class C misdemeanor.
Okay. I'm not sure I understand why you can write one under 29, but you can't write one under 30.
Because 29 expressly says that for violations of this order, GA 29, you can issue a citation after you've given a warning for $250 to the person who is not complying with that order. So it provides the authority.
So in that situation, if Randy warns somebody and then goes back in there and they still are not wearing one, or they refuse to wear one after his warning, and he writes the citation, where do they go to respond to that citation? Is it a JP, or is it would it be the JP?
I assume that there's instructions on the citation as to how you handle that citation. But yes, I would assume it is the JP.
JP is that precinct.
Oh, hi, Randy.
Okay. That's what I needed to know.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, at this time, I will begin. I'm going to start with those folks who are going to be requesting a call. Take one machine, separate it away a little bit from all the ones that are very close together. And so those folks who choose not to wear masks can vote at that one, but that all the folks where the machines, the constant complaint I get is we're supposed to be social distancing, and I've got 2 or 3 people in line that are sitting there with no masks on, and as opposed to at least the ones that have masks on are in the machines that are not 6 feet apart. What you said is that you've got 300 extra machines out. As a result of that, there is no way you can take a machine and separate it off. And I guess I would just, I've said I'm going to go by and visit some sites. I would ask that the commissioners in sites that are in your area, masks are obviously something that I believe in. I'm taking beatings over this every week. But if somebody is not wearing a mask, we can't tell them to. We can't prevent them from voting unless they do. But I would certainly like to see a machine set up for them that does not, again, put them in the middle of folks who aren't wearing masks. That's just kind of where I'm at on that, and what I would hope that would happen.
Like I said, we've looked into it. To keep those lines short, we've added the equipment that we calculated we needed, and we're certainly right on the limit. The long lines are telling us already, we're right there in certain places, right? Some have shorter lines than others. So my point being, the only way it looks like, and I will start probably visiting those sites personally, but from the instruction that was given to the technicians, hardly any site has any room to create that one machine separated gap. I will go visit them personally But if we can't, the question is, would this court want me to remove one to create a gap between the last one in the chain and everyone before them? That's probably the only thing that looks like we can do at this point.
It would certainly be my preference that everybody who voted wore a mask. But I am very sensitive to voting rights, protections, and equal protection under the law. I am not convinced that you can treat persons who don't wear a mask differently in the cause of voting than you treat people who wear a mask. That seems to me to bring up some constitutional problems. And it makes me nervous.
You might also find that a number of people who don't want to be jammed in that are wearing a mask would prefer to go use an isolated machine. I think it works both ways, and I don't see how you force or mandate somebody without a mask to go to that isolated machine.
I think it's at least questionable, to leave it at that.
If we're going to start defining law, then let's let the lawyers do it and not.
I don't.
I mean, if that's
I never purported to be practicing law.
Come on down.
I said I personally had a problem with it.
I think Commissioner Brooks raises valid concerns, and Ficus, it would not be the recommendation that we treat those wearing masks and not wearing masks to use different machines,
So
at least not to mandate it.
Because when I get the calls, I'm not going to say to them that the DA has said that we cannot set a machine aside for those folks who are choosing not to wear masks to vote, and that we can't equate social distancing.
I think it would be more appropriate to say that we would not recommend it.
Well, that's not what I'm asking you, is what your recommendation is. I'm asking you what the law says.
You can do whatever you want, but we would not recommend it because it poses concerns about constitutional voting issues. So, is it possible to do it? Yes. But does it raise legal implications? Yes, which is why we would not recommend it.
Okay. Raises implications. I mean, usually you'll say, yes, you can do this, or no, you can't. But in this situation, I hear you kind of hedging your bet. I mean, you've opined that basically we can require the masks. A lot of people have said that violates my constitutional right. Your thought in that matter is, no, it doesn't. You've got the authority we interpret that you've got the authority under the law. So I'm just trying to figure out whether you're saying or not that if someone doesn't wear a mask, we're not telling them they can't wear a mask. They can't, if they're not wearing a mask, they can't vote. All we're saying is if you're choosing not to wear a mask, here is the place, here's the machine that you will, or the machines that you will vote on.
I think that any further discussion of this would be more appropriate in our closed session.
Okay. Then we'll set it up. I don't quite understand. I mean, it's either you're recommending or you're not.
I'm not recommending it.
Okay, then we'll just leave it right there. Anything else for Hyder at this time?
Yes. Hyder, will you talk a little bit about some of the observations you've been able to make so far about curbside voting?
Curbside voting, we noticed that I think a third or a little under a third of curbside voting was requested at the Mansfield Courthouse. That was on Saturday when I looked at the date at the end of the day.